afternoon, evening. Welcome to uh, risk and adaptability. So I was just waxing on about I was adapting today about oversleeping. So that's my way of adapting, Mark.
Well, you look well slept.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Look really good.
That's positivism. Someone said I was listening to a coach once who said, if you don't sleep enough before a game, you should say, well, I'm really awake for the game. If you sleep too much, you should say, well, I'm very well rested. So you're always looking at the positive side of life.
Yeah, and try to make sure that when you're awake, that you're not asleep.
Yeah.
People often are sleepwalking through life.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is gonna be fun today.
Yeah,
I
it's
can
going to
tell.
be fun. All right, we're going to talk a little bit today about risk, adaptability, agility, etc. And several of our readers and listeners and writers wrote about dealing with failure. And one of the people that was very interesting talked a little bit about failure and how failure is seen in other cultures, Mark. And it really caused me to think. This person said, "Look, I value failure, and I kind of buy into a little bit what you guys are saying, that the only way to learn is to fail forward. But the culture where I am doesn't value that."
Yeah. So I think one of the underlying themes of entrepreneurialism is kind of going against the tide and really doing things and seeing things that perhaps others either don't recognize or don't accept. And so in the spirit of being entrepreneurial, I think you start with yourself. Is it okay to fail? Is it okay to laugh and be laughed at? And is it okay to make some mistakes and pick yourself up again? That's really what entrepreneurialism is all about. Not being too concerned about how things are, but more concerned about how things can be better, how can things be improved. And certainly if you're in a culture where failure is not as accepted, I would make the argument that I'm not sure that failure is accepted the way in our country the way that it might be, and it's something that I think we're learning to use as a tool for moving forward and progressing. So even though cultural demonstration may be different, I think sometimes cognitively we all have that sense of fear related to making mistakes and failing and taking risk.
Yeah. Well, we don't. Good. That's great, and we don't mean to though downplay her struggle in a culture that is very perfectionistic. It sounded like too.
No.
But I think part of what you're saying, Mark, at least maybe this is just what I want to hear, is that a lot of this dealing with failure and failing forward is within ourselves.
I've experienced it, and I think the reality is that you got to be comfortable with where you're going. And if other people might be laughing, then try to find a way to laugh at yourself, and then take whatever nuggets could be in that. Cultures are difficult. I mean, we have as humans herd mentality. And one of the things that we are finding is that, particularly in the worlds of education in the United States, I can't speak for other words, is that herd mentality and that mass representation of how you get things accomplished in the learning environment is changing. It's becoming increasingly individual, increasingly personalized. And I think if we can translate that into other elements of our lives, whether it's in the risk area or the fail area, that's going to be very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there were also comments that leads from this. What about when your vision differs significantly from others, or your vision differs from your organization? And several people that wrote or posted were saying things like they're beginning to realize that in the clarification of their vision that they may not be in the right place, they may not be doing the right thing, and we're happy to hear that, I guess.
Well, the thing about it is that the change comes about through provocation of the norm, what's already happening, and so, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not even sure really how to properly respond to that one, because I think it just is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was impressed that in the face of some of that, several of our posters were very proactive about going to the establishment, whatever that means, and presenting, hey, I want to do something different. I don't like this. I want to move in a different direction. I'm feeling myself pulled in a different way. And some of them were having success. It kind of reminds me that I oftentimes assume that if I take my new idea, my new direction to somebody in authority or in a position that it'll be rejected. So I kind of shut down myself before I even try.
Well, and this hits on a whole bunch of stuff that we've convey and are conveying, and that is in this day and age, as an economic unit of one, as a personal brand, there's a level of interdependency, and there's a level of interdependency with the people that you're working for, the people that you're working with, and the people that are working with you. And the minute you feel some level of disharmony, I think it's important to have dialogues and communication, because you're not always going to see eye to eye. And in addition to that, I think you want to align yourselves with people that have like values and beliefs, but maybe don't always think exactly the same way, that are going to be willing to challenge you, and then you come up hopefully with a greater good, a greater solution through that dialogue. But as I've career counseled thousands of people, as I like to tell people, when you're selecting or working with an organization, you want to look at the organization. Does it demonstrate the values and beliefs that you have? Can you work collaboratively? Can you make a difference? And then who you're working for. I mean, who your direct report, who your boss is absolutely critical, because if those two things are in alignment and they're really strong and good relationships, great things are going to happen for you. So my suggestion would be that make decisions based upon those two things if you can, and if those things change, then you've got other decisions to make. But communication, communication, communication.
Okay. Well, we're talking a little bit about systems and who you report to and those kind of things. There were still some comments this week. We had some of these last week too about delegation. And again, it came up that people were having some problems with delegating or sharing, that they maybe it's still a little bit of confusion about economic unit of one thing, where they're saying, look, I've been my own boss for a long time. I've been doing my own thing, and now I'm in a position where I want to delegate, I want to be more collaborative, but they don't do it like I like them to do it.
So what's immediately coming to mind is, are you delegating tasks, or are you delegating opportunities and challenges for people? Right. People in this day and age, for the most part, capable people, want to be delegated problems and challenges, and then they want to work, hopefully collaboratively, to figure out what it is. If you say, this is what I want, this is my problem, this is how I want it done, you're going to get pushback, because this is a knowledge-based world. There's way too much information at our disposal to get things done. And by the way, there's a myriad of ways to accomplish a task. And the way that you would accomplish a task and the way that I might accomplish a task are different. If I'm driving down the highway, and let's just use Northern California's example, from Sonoma to San Jose, there's a million ways I can go. Maybe not a million, but there's a number of ways that I can go, and good ways. But the key is getting to San Jose. I might go East Bay route, I might go South Bay route, I might go 101, I might go 280. Sorry for those of you across the world that don't understand those highways, but the point is, I'm going to get to San Jose and you're going to get to San Jose. And I like to drive during a scenic route, you might want to go back roads. So I think that's key, and having bosses that want to delegate problems and challenges and guide you and facilitate great opportunity is really what it's all about. And nobody, I don't think nobody in this world, anybody in this world, really likes to be told what to do, or how to do it, at least. Yeah.
I wrote back to some of our readers too, about our listeners, about thinking about delegation differently too. That a lot of people see this whole topic of delegation as you either turn it over or you don't. And there's a whole lot of research and writing that there are all different levels of delegation that they might want to play around with. I could say, Mark, I want you to do this and report to me every 10 minutes. I could say, Mark, do it any way you want, but do let me know before you make the final decision. I could say, Mark, I totally trust you. I don't even want to know. So to try to have people think about delegation differently and much more openly than it's either done or not done. Delegation is an art, I think. It's something you really have to work on. It's a skill, too.
Some people are really good at it, and others, entrepreneurs, have difficulty, actually, with delegation, because they're so used to doing so many things in a certain way that sometimes businesses and companies get to a certain point where the businesses outgrow them because of this issue.
I'm not sure I understand. Say a little more about that.
So you're an entrepreneur and you've got an idea and you've got a product or a service, and let's say you are the product developer, and you build a business very successfully, you hire people around you, you may have a co-founder that's, say, really good in marketing. You two guys are used to touching everything. You're used to touching the client, the customer. You're used to touching the supplier, the manufacturer, the employees in a very intimate way. And as the business grows, you don't have that level of, and may not have that level, probably won't if you're really, really successful, that level of intimacy directly. You have to depend on others to conduct business. You know, you conduct business through others, and that's much different than it is when you're actually feeling, for lack of a better word, and you're actually communicating directly with the resources on an ongoing basis. And it's tough. It's a tough challenge. And you see that with very successful, let's use salespeople as an example. People that are selling every single day sometimes have difficulty becoming managers. Look at some of the greatest players in sports or musicians out in the musical world. They may be great quarterbacks or great receivers, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a great coach. In fact, if you look around, the majority of the great coaches weren't great players. Now, there's some exceptions, but they were the guys that had to struggle, or they had to work really, really hard, and they had to know all the X's and O's, are the ones that become the outstanding coaches. So I guess my point being is that as careers or businesses unfold, the requirements for different roles change dramatically.
Very true. We had comments about, in terms of adaptability, about financial barriers to change. People talking about, you know, I'm in a job now and I've got to keep my job in order to support myself, but I'm very interested in some other things, and how can I leave when I've still got these other interests over here? Other people saying, you know, I've gotten kind of dependent on my steady income. I don't know if I can take a risk. So there was quite a bit written about financial barriers to change, I guess, is just part of the core of adaptability.
Well, we're constantly balancing that requirement for inner passion and purpose and external reality, and over the course of time, you know, external practicalities for that matter. You know, we got to pay bills. We got kids that are going to school. We got colleges. We got rents. We got mortgages. We've got food we need to pay for. So I think having your eye on both of those balls at the same time is really critical. But when you're talking strictly professionally, I really believe, actually I don't believe, I know that we are in a stage where you can craft. If you've got skills and experiences and tools that are relevant to a marketplace, you can craft a career path, a work path that will both ensure a financial recurring revenue stream and develop some of the more creative elements of your potentially professional career down the road. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't wave a magic wand and say, hey, I'm going to, you know, get this and do this. No, it's incremental. But if you've got something that people need, craft, you know, have a vision for how this is going to unfold, and then take steps.
Talk about the word craft. I mean, because people out there are going, yeah, right. I want to do these two things. Don't they? Either they just appear with some people. What do you mean by craft? That's hard work.
Okay, so yeah, it's really hard work. But I think you develop a roadmap, and anything that's written is going to be better than not. You create a personalized, we call a personalized learning environment for yourself, so that you are developing skills and experiences that are relevant not just to the marketplace today, but to the marketplace tomorrow. You're creating connectivity between what you're developing and what the external world needs. And there's a myriad, well, this is one of them, massive open online course. There's a myriad of things that are right at our fingertips to make sure that we're relevant on an ongoing basis. And by the way, that we're dispersing those talents and distributing those talents in a myriad of ways. You don't have to be, in most instances, you don't have to be in an office from 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. like you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You can get work done by remotely or flexibly. The difficulty, in my opinion, in this day and age is really self-regulating yourself so that you don't become over-consumed by all of these opportunities. Now, with that said, we're talking to a lot of educators. So there's going to be times where you have to be accessible to your students. There's going to be times where you're going to have to go to class and teach, be available for office hours. But even in the world of education, it's becoming increasingly flexible. It's becoming, the students are going to demand it. here we are. So, you know, I use the word craft. Design, we talk about design thinking. You're the expert on that. I mean, you can talk a little bit about design thinking. If it's not working, blow it up, talk to people about it.
Part of what gets in the way is that people think they have to have the answer before they start. They think they have to have everything worked through, etc. And what we know about design thinking and a lot of modern ways of thinking is sometimes the best entrepreneurs are the ones who say, I got an idea, I'm going to try it, I'm going to put out a prototype, I'm going to go see what happens, and I'm going to learn from that. I'm not going to be, and several people wrote in about perfectionism. I'm not going to be waiting till I have the absolute drop-dead right idea. Plus, you're not going to know when you have that anyway. You're only going to know when your idea interfaces with the real world. And if you take that feedback from the real world and start incorporating it into your thinking, that's what makes ideas come alive. It's not sitting in a room and coming up with the idea.
You're so right, and what you're basically talking is the development of wisdom, and wisdom is created through a combination of knowledge, internal knowledge, mental capacity, intellect, and experience. And those two things combined, and practical experience. And that's what I think the educators and the entrepreneurial educators of today are doing. They're creating an element of, hey, we're going to infuse our students with some level of intellectual capital. Simultaneously, we're going to test that by giving them opportunities and experiences outside of the classroom, whether it be through project-based learning or working in internships or whatever it might be. And again, I think the opportunities for this kind of experience are endless, and I think it's what's demands. I think it's what's exciting. And perfectionism. Look, you know, fundamentally, you know, there's a lot of people. I used to be that way, but when I started losing my hair, I had to kind of rethink that because perfection goes out the door when you lose your hair. But you know, the reality is, I came to a real epiphany once. And the reality is, we're not here to experience perfection. We're here to perfect experience.
Oh, hello.
And if you can perfect experience, you'll learn.
Did you just make that up, by the way?
No, it's written somewhere.
Right.
So that's why we're here. And so the journey is what it's all about. The destiny is going to come and go.
Yeah. Well, and it harkens back to one of our themes, and that's pivoting. That came up again with several people talking about how they'd started to do things and then they'd pivoted a little bit. So pivoting came up again. And how is pivoting different? Why is that a big term now, Mark? Why is that so popular in business? Why isn't it just changed?
Because so many people have either made mistakes or see a challenge or is confronted with an obstacle, and the course that they were on is going to lead to a massive wreck. And so they better pivot or they're going to get crushed. I think also it has to do with being spontaneous and being creative and being able to express yourself in a way, you know, more seriously, in a way that's going to improve the situation that you're in. It's kind of like what we talked about related to going down to San Jose from here. Look, if there's a traffic jam on the Golden Gate Bridge, then you might want to go around over the Bay Bridge.
I think part of what you're right about with pivoting, too, has to do with people being more comfortable with small mid-course corrections rather than having to say, oh, God, I failed, now I got to start all over again. The real entrepreneur does a lot of small mid-course corrections. It's like if you look at an airplane, I'm a pilot, and if you're flying, you're always going to be off course a little bit. You're always correcting at any given time. So to me, that's what pivoting is. It gives people permission to make little changes without having to catastrophize.
And it gives people the opportunity to make little mistakes, and as you said, learn from them and improve so that the next time they steer the course that they're on a better path, that they're on a better road to wherever they're going. Pivoting's fun. I mean, you know, if you're cooking, right, you got a recipe that you've done a million times, you know that whatever it is that you're cooking is going to come out good, but you know, hey, this time I might want to try a little more rosemary, or I might want to try a little bit more sage, or whatever it might be, and you mix it up, you say, you know what, hey, this is a little bit better than the last time that I had. I mean, that's kind of the fun of life. So look at pivoting as an opportunity for expression and spontaneity, and not one of, oh my God, it's it's an obstacle I can't overcome.
Yeah, good. Good. We had some people writing about, in terms of adaptability and flexibility and such, talking about their CVs, updating their CVs, etc. I'd love to get some of your. I have found CVs or resumes, whatever you want to call them. I I think the whole way business, at least, thinks about those seems to be changing a little bit. It's not you just write one and it sits there for life, or it. I was told back many years ago that the secrets are you had to write it on nice paper and make sure it was thick, and you had these parts. And I just don't. I think the world of CVs and resumes is changing. Could you talk about that from a business perspective, Mark? How do people see that now?
So I mean, I've looked at and touched literally tens of thousands of resumes in my career, and that's been a gift and a challenge. LinkedIn is just popping right into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I think LinkedIn is the moving, living, breathing for most industries, and I think in the educational world it's becoming increasingly prominent, but less used than in others. But it's the recruiting tool of the world now, LinkedIn. And so having a really good, strong presence and CV, resume, online document, whatever you want to call LinkedIn, I think is critical. And because it's out there every single day. It's a way to connect. It's a way to network in a pretty quick way. It's not going to build the kind of depth of relationship that I think is required long term, but resumes historically were door openers, and they were reminders of things that we've accomplished, and they were a way to share those things. Excuse me, I'm getting ready to sneeze. So I think that take a look at LinkedIn, see how a lot of really good LinkedIn models are, and I think you're going to get. It talks about not only what you've done, but what you're doing. It talks about who you're connected with, the association you're involved in, where you went to school, who's looking at your CV, who's interested in you, and it's a very powerful tool. So, and the other thing is that we like to historically look at resumes as a very project-oriented thing, and this is it at a point in time, and our resumes are changing as we speak right now. We're conducting a massive open online course. It's not on my LinkedIn, probably should be, but it's something that, again, in this day and age, you just got to continually fuel the tools and experiences, and you got to know how to promote them. And to me, that's done more electronically today than it is with a piece of paper. Not to say you don't want to have the piece of paper, because people still like to hold things, but to me, the nuts and bolts of the content in the forum is you can get it, pump it into LinkedIn.
I'm sure this is a bit dated in my comment here, but I find a lot of young people now are overly dependent on their resume, whether it be online or that. I think it's still true that resumes are important, but if you begin to rely on a resume as representing you to other people, I think you're going to be in trouble. It's all about relationships, contacts, networking. Those things are very important. And I've had a lot of young people, and I've looked at a lot of resumes also in schools, hiring people, and people who don't get a job will say, "Well, I turned in a really good resume. I mean, couldn't they see?" And don't let the excellence of your resume substitute for the relationship building, the networking, and such that we're emphasizing here.
I was in the staffing business for 20-something years, as I said on some of the videos, and the reality is that most of us are going to get jobs through people we know. Yeah, there's some nice vehicles out there. I mentioned LinkedIn, and I mentioned staffing firms, and there's a myriad of others. But the reality is you're going to get work through or opportunity through people that know and care about you. So the more people that you know and the more people that you care about, who will then care about you, will facilitate your opportunities and your next opportunities. So you're spot on. It's to me ironic that the most successful internet sites in today's day and age are social in nature. Young people particularly, are thirsting for connectivity, and the reality is the connectivity that you're getting right now through this vehicle of online video manifestation and this, where I get to put my arm on Paul and touch him and feel his energy, are completely different. And you can't replace this with that. You just can't. And I think frequently our young people get caught up in that. In fact, sometimes they use it as a veil. Of veil, and what that does is it unfortunately diminishes intimacy. And people are craving for intimacy, yet they don't know how to do it. And so, like you said, resume's important, LinkedIn's important, in-person invoice communication is important, and in person. Make yourself a person, because it's harder to turn off a person than it is a piece of paper.
Another Nelson quote?
Maybe.
Okay.
I got to remember that one.
It's harder to turn off a person than it is a piece of paper.
It is. Don't you think?
Could be a book.
Or in a book.
Okay. Well, we'll check with Stacy here to see if we've missed any big topics. Stace,
You hit them all.
hit them all. Okay.
Nicely done.
Did we touch on financial barriers to change? Did we respond to that well enough?
Maybe not enough. Maybe not enough. Other thoughts on that
Just one, and that is, entrepreneurialism is really about resource development and resource allocation, and there's probably not a business or an educator or an administrator that wouldn't like to have more money at their disposal. And the reality is how well are you using what you have at your disposal, and how do you generate more creatively? Particularly in public schools in the United States of America, some of the most successful public schools know how to drive supplemental revenues, and there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. I'm not an expert in that world, but there are, and I think that those institutions, public institutions that are going to be most successful, are going to have a combination of public funds and other resources. How and where they come from is going to be dependent upon demographics and student population and need, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's happening at public universities now. That even public universities are, the majority of their income is coming from not public sources, from business, from partnerships, from grants, etc.
Well, in the business school, little plug, Sonoma State University School of Business has the foremost wine business program in the world, and that has promoted and perpetuated the success of that, and the programs have perpetuated relationships with some of the biggest names in the wine industry, and hence comes money, intellectual property and capital, support, people, and to
relationships,